Let me recording this session. Okay, right. So yesterday, what we have seen, right? We have seen what is Salesforce, what is CRM, and so we have seen what is Trailhead, how you can create your own Trailhead account, and how you can connect with people in the Trailhead, right? How you can join groups, and what is the importance of different types of events, right? That are there in the Salesforce community and all of that, right? So, and I know it is little overwhelming, right? We have discussed a lot of information yesterday, okay? But all of this is like a kind of the fundamentals or the basics that you should know about, like so what is Salesforce ecosystem and all about, right? So once you know all of this, then you'll get to know, like why you are doing something, right? So if you don't know all of these things, right, somewhere in the middle you feel like so I'm doing this. I know how to do this, but I'm not really sure why I'm doing this, right? That kind of state of mind you'll go into, right? I don't want you to be in that state of mind, right? Whatever you're doing, you should know why you're doing that. Okay. So then only you'll be able to absorb concepts in a more better way. And then only you'll be able to explain those things, when someone asks you, like, what is the purpose of it, right? So that's fine. Okay, so now today what we'll see is, like today we'll see how we can create our own Salesforce org, right? The same way, how to navigate within the Salesforce org, and on what principles Salesforce has built its platform, right? So, and we'll see the basics of Salesforce platform as well. Okay, so these are the things we'll discuss today, and this will not be more than 1 hour or 1.5 hours, right? Right? That's how it will be, right? So now let's look into it. Okay, so we have discussed that, right? Businesses use Salesforce. Okay, businesses use Salesforce. For what reason? For what reason? Right? For what reason? To run their business effectively, right? To run their business effectively and more efficiently, they use Salesforce. But as an individual, how you can learn Salesforce, right? You cannot go and buy Salesforce instance in order to learn Salesforce, right? As an individual, you cannot do that. Why? Because so each and every Salesforce license costs somewhere around 25,000 rupees to 30,000 rupees based on the products or the functionalities that you are looking for, right? It'll range anywhere. I mean, it'll start from anywhere between $75, that is somewhere around 5,000 rupees, to it'll go up to 25 to 30,000 rupees as well. Okay, so but if you want to learn Salesforce, and if you have to buy at least 2 or 3 licenses, then it'll cost you somewhere around 1 lakh rupees, or maybe, right, 50,000 rupees that you have to spend on monthly basis, right? So then how people can learn Salesforce, right? It will become very difficult, right? In that case. So for that reason, what Salesforce has done is, right, whoever want to learn Salesforce, for those people, Salesforce has started giving their Salesforce instances, right, for free. Okay, for free. They have given the Salesforce orgs. We generally call that as orgs, right? So what Salesforce has done is, Salesforce has given the Salesforce orgs for each and everyone who want to learn Salesforce for free. But it comes with few limitations. Okay, it comes with a few limitations. What happens if Salesforce give all the functionalities that are there, right, for a real Salesforce org? Then people will just simply enroll or register for this particular free edition of Salesforce org, and they'll just simply use that for their business, right? So that is not the proper way to do it, right? So for that reason, what Salesforce has done is, right, Salesforce has kept few limitations on this particular free orgs, right? We can call them as org, right? As I said, Salesforce org, right? They've kept few limitations on the Salesforce org, like you can have a maximum of 2 Salesforce license users. Okay, you can have a maximum of 2 Salesforce license users in your free org, right? And along with that, right, so there will be a limitation on number of records or the number of data that you can store in your Salesforce org as well. Okay, in the free edition, right, you can store up to 25 MB data. Okay, so that means you cannot store more than 5,000 or 5,000 to 10,000 records. Okay, So you may ask me what records are. So we'll see all of those things, right? So you will not be able to store more than 5,000 to 10,000 records of data, right, into your free Salesforce org, right? So that is enough, right? For someone to learn. So this particular 2 licenses are enough, and up to 25 MB of data is also enough, right? So, but along with this, whatever functionalities that any business will have for their real Salesforce org, all of those functionalities you'll find in the free edition of Salesforce org. Okay, all those functionalities. In fact, you'll have more functionalities than what Salesforce basic level license is offering. Okay, so you'll have almost each and every feature that is there in the enterprise edition of the Salesforce license, right? So if you go to Salesforce website, okay, so if we go to Salesforce website, let me just go there. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so if you go to Salesforce website, okay, and if you go to any of the products or something like that, all right, so let me open any of the products here. And if I go to the pricing part, okay, so we should have the pricing buddy, but somehow I missed this, right? See pricing. Yeah, if you go to the pricing part, you'll be able to see all the editions that are available in the Salesforce licensing part, right? Essentials is there, professional is there, enterprise is there, and unlimited edition is also there, right? So, but whatever functionality that you'll find in the enterprise editions, right? All of that functionality you'll have in your free Salesforce org, right? So, but it comes with limitations, as I just said, right? You can have only up to two what? You can have up to two licenses, two free licenses. Okay, so this is what it is. And see, these free orgs, right? As I just told you, right? Salesforce gives the free orgs for us, right? So what do we call these free orgs, right? So what is the edition, the name of the edition that we have for these free orgs, right? Salesforce has given a lot of edition names, right? So the ones that we have seen in the pricing part, right? The same way for this free orgs also, Salesforce has kept, some naming, which is called as developer edition. Okay, what is it? Which is called as developer edition, right? Whatever orgs that we create as individual developers, right, who want to learn Salesforce, developers or administrators, right? So they can create free Salesforce developer edition org, and they can start practicing everything over there. Okay, so and the same way, right? So this developer org, you can create on your own. You can just simply go to something called developer.salesforce.org.com, right? Developer.salesforce.com, and from there you can just simply register for this particular account. Okay, so the same way, right? So we already know there is something called Trailhead, right? The same way we already know something called Trailhead. So in Trailhead we can create our own free learning account, right? We can create our own free Salesforce learning account. So this is something that we have already discussed, right? So from Trailhead also you can create any number of free Salesforce orgs. Okay, so for practicing anything, right? In Trailhead, what you'll have different modules, you'll have different units, and each and every unit, either you'll have a quiz or some hands-on exercise that you need to complete. We already know that. But if you have to complete that hands-on exercise, how Trailhead will get to know that whether you have completed that hands-on exercise or not is through Trailhead Playgrounds. Okay, I'll tell you what this Trailhead Playgrounds is. Okay, Trailhead Playgrounds. Okay, so these Trailhead Playgrounds are also like the real Salesforce orgs, right? They are also the free Salesforce orgs, but we call them as Trailhead Playgrounds, right? That is also somewhat similar to Developer Edition. Okay, so whereas in Developer Edition, you can just simply go to this particular site and you can create your own account. But whereas from Trailhead, whenever you feel like you need one Salesforce org, you can just simply create the any number of free Salesforce orgs based on your requirements. Okay, so for any hands-on exercises, if you feel like you need a separate Salesforce org for it, right? If you want to complete that, you can create a separate Trailhead Playground for it. Trailhead Playground is nothing but, again, it's a free Salesforce org, right? But it comes with some pre-set of functionalities. Okay, it will comes with some pre set of functionality, pre-functionality, I would say. Okay. Whereas developer edition, it will come like a clean org, right? You'll not have anything in it. Okay. Except some high level dummy data, right? You will not have any new functionality or, anything that is there in it, right? You will get a pure org. But whereas for the trailhead playgrounds, based on the requirement, sometimes, Salesforce, what they'll do is they'll install some functionality, depends upon whatever hands-on exercise that you need to complete, right? So they'll install some other functionality, right? They'll configure some functionality into the trailhead playground, and they'll create that free Salesforce org for you. So you'll find sometimes, some extra functionality in it, along with whatever clean org that you have, right? On top of that, you'll have some kind of customizations, and you'll have some kind of new functionality added. Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Great. Okay. Let me clear all of this. So now let's see how we can create our own Salesforce org. Okay. So what I can do, as I just told you, you can create in two different ways. One is developer.salesforce.com. Once you go here, okay, Salesforce has recently changed their UI. Okay. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? What the heck? Seems like they've changed the UI. Just give me a second, right? Create a free Salesforce developer. Okay. Developer.salesforce.com/signup. Okay. Add the sign up. Then you'll go to this particular screen. Okay. Wherein you have to fill your basic information here, like your first name, last name, your email address. In the role, what you have to do is you have to select either developer or administrator, right? So, and then company name, which name you should give in this company name, which name you should give in this company name, as I just told you yesterday, give Exalt Link Inc. Okay. In the country and region, you can just simply select India. In the postal code, whatever postal code you want to give, you can give that particular postal code, and you have to give some username as well, right? So this username can be your email address as well, but there is something that you need to consider. Okay. So you can create any number of developer accounts with the same email address, but you should not have the same username across multiple orgs. Okay. Username is unique across the whole Salesforce orgs that are there in the Salesforce ecosystem. Okay. So what I just said, right? So you should have unique username, right? Unique username across all Salesforce orgs, across all Salesforce orgs. Okay. So that means what? Okay. So now you have an email ID. So username will also look somewhat similar to, email address, right? So that username format should be somewhat similar to email address, but you can create any number of Salesforce orgs, right? With a single email address, but each and every org should have its unique username. Okay. Okay. So now what I need you to do is, right, so just go and create one Salesforce developer org for yourself, right? And along with this, right, we'll see how we can create our trailhead playground as well, right? So creating trailhead playgrounds is very easy and very fast, right? So, but once you sign up, right, what will happen is you'll receive one email to your email address, right? And then you have to verify your email address. Once you verify that, then your account is ready, right? You can just simply log into the Salesforce from login.salesforce.com. Okay. From login.salesforce.com. What is it? Login.salesforce.com. You can come to the login.salesforce.com and you can give your username and password. Okay. You can give your username and password so that you'll be logging into your own Salesforce org. Okay. So that is fine. But if it is Trailhead Playground, you don't need to log in and all of that, right? You can create Trailhead Playground from the Trailhead account itself, right? And at the same time, you can launch your Trailhead Playgrounds, right? The Salesforce orgs from the Trailhead itself, right? You can do that from the Trailhead itself. Now, what I'll do is I'll just simply go to my Trailhead account. Okay, trailhead.salesforce.com. What I'll do is I'll just simply log in into the Trailhead with my credentials, right? So I'm logging in with my Google account, right? So since the session is already there, it just simply took me to the trailhead. Okay, so now I've logged in. Okay, so right, so what I can do is, right, if I have to create any of the trailhead playgrounds, right, the simplest way is like, I can go to the projects, right? So from projects, if I open any of the projects related module or something like that, or unit or something like that, so in the bottom, right, if I go down, I'll find some hands-on exercise, right? I have to complete that particular hands-on exercise, right? I've told you, along with quizzes, you'll have hands-on exercises as well, right? So those hands-on exercises, if you want to quickly find, right, you can just simply go to projects and open any of the projects related unit. You will find this particular section and go here, and from here, right, if you already have any of the trailhead playgrounds that are created in your trailhead account, right, you can see all of those trailhead playgrounds here, right? And if you see, so I have almost like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, right, 8 trailhead playgrounds that I've created so far. Okay, so either I can use any of these playgrounds in order to complete my hands-on exercise, right? I can launch that playground from here, or if I want a new playground altogether, I can create a new playground as well, right? So, or if I want to connect my developer org, whatever developer org that I've created, right? So if I'm implementing some functionality in my developer org, and if I want to, complete this particular hands-on exercise using that developer org, I don't want to use any of the trailhead playgrounds. If I want to use that developer org, I can still use that. In order to use that, what I have to do is I have to connect the org, right? If I click on connect the org, it'll ask me to input the user, username and password of that particular developer org, and then boom, it's connected, right? Then you'll find that org in all of the playgrounds that are available here. Okay, so that is also another way, right? So now what I'll do is I'll just simply create a new playground from here. So what I'll do is, right, so by default it will give you one name, right? Either you can use that name or you can change that name to whatever name you want. So most of the times orgs, for Salesforce orgs, we'll give the company names. Okay, so but if you want to give exact link for all the orgs, you cannot use the same you can use the same name, that's not a problem, but you'll not have the same kind of URL for everyone. Why? Because each and every org's URL is unique, right? So you don't need to worry about all that URL and all of that, right? You can give whatever name you want to give here. Okay, so that URL part and all of that, so we'll see that in the later stages in the custom domain and all of that, but for now you can just simply leave it. Okay, so in this case, what I'll do is I'll just simply give a name as what? May 10th. Most of the times, this should be the company name, right? So, but for now, I'm just simply giving a random name for our understanding, right? May 10th batch, right? Something like this. Okay. I'm creating my Salesforce org, right? It will take like couple of minutes, right? For that org to be created. Why? Because from the background, Salesforce will do all the stuff, right? Configure everything and create that org for you, and it will build that thing. And once that is available, it will be shown here, right? Sometimes it will take 2 or 3 minutes, right? So let's wait for a while, and then we can just simply jump in and log in into our Salesforce org. It is almost done. Yes, it's done. Okay, so my trailhead playground is ready, right? My Salesforce org is ready. So this is how a real Salesforce org will look like. Okay, so we are here, right? Since this is a trailhead playground, it will take you to one of the apps named Playground Starter in the Salesforce, right? So you may ask me, what is app, right? We'll see all of that. Okay, so that's where you'll land in, but you can just simply leave it like this. Okay, so this is what the real Salesforce org will look like, and from here, whatever functionality that you want to create for your business, you can create all of that functionality, and from here, right, your ND business users also, right, so manage their day-to-day business operations. All right, so everything happens from here. All right, so now let me show you, like, so let me give you some basic understanding of any web application, right? So that you'll get to understand, like, how Salesforce also works, right? So Salesforce also is a web application, right? So if you know how any any web application works, then obviously you'll get some idea on how Salesforce also works. Okay. So if you take any of the applications, right? If you take any of the web applications, right? So that could be anything, right? So that could be Facebook, right? So now if you consider any web application, right? So whether it's Facebook or Google, right? Or anything, right? So any web application, right? I'm just simply giving these examples, but consider any web application, right? You'll have two things, two major things. One is front end, okay, and the other one is back end. Okay, what is front end and what is back end, right? Front end is the place where the users, okay, the users of that particular web application, right, log in into that web application and perform whatever task that application allows us to perform. Okay, so that is what front end is, right? If you have to log in into Facebook, then what you'll do, you'll just simply go to facebook.com, and from there you'll log in, and once you log in, right, what do you do, right? You'll connect with your friends, right, and you'll chat with them, right? You'll post some images, right, or you'll post some kind of text content and all of that, right? You'll collaborate with people and all of that, right? Where you'll do all of that in that particular web application, you'll do it from the front end. Who will do all of this, right? So the end users. Who are the end users? In Facebook example, right, we are the end users, you, me, right? Anyone who is using Facebook, so those people can be considered as the end users, right? So how end users use any web applications? They'll use the web application, or they can access the web application from the front end, right? So then what is back end? Okay, so back end is the place where, right, the administrators, right, administrators of IT administrators, or whatever you call it, right? Those people. So, okay, so manage this particular Facebook web application from this particular backend. Okay, so this IT administrators or the people, right? So who is looking after that particular web application, right? So they'll configure things, they'll build functionality that is needed for the end users, and that needs to be available in the front end, or maybe what, so as I just told you, right, building new functionalities, right, and providing accesses, right? So, or maybe restricting accesses, right, right, something like this, right? So anything that is needed to be controlled, right? So see, if you want your to control your front end, right, so you'll control all of that from the back end of the application. Okay, so who will do all of that? The administrators, developers, right? So whoever is working on that particular web application, so they'll work from the back end and they'll configure everything, right? So say for example, if Facebook want to build a new feature tomorrow, then what they'll do, right? They'll build that feature and they'll deploy it in the backend. Once that is deployed, then that will be available for the end users in the front end. Okay, so the same way, if they have to restrict some user, right, suspend some user, right, because he is not following some community guidelines, Facebook community guidelines, or whatever it could be, then what they can do is, right, so they can restrict that user from the backend. They can see who are all using this particular app from the backend, right? So if they have to provide some extra features, right, only to few set of users, not all the people, right? They have built a new feature and they want to test it with only few set of users, then what they can do, right? They can provide that particular access to only those set of users from the backend, right? All the application management happens from the backend, right? So this is how any web application works, right? I've taken an example of Facebook, right? Google also works the same way, like Salesforce also works. Okay, right? So now let's see how Salesforce works, right? This, like how any web application works, Salesforce also will have something called front end, right? So this is not the right terminology that we generally use, but for our understanding, right, I'm using this particular terminology. Okay, and you'll have backend also. Okay, who will work in the backend, right? All Salesforce professionals. Okay, so a Salesforce org is given for your business. Okay, and who will use your Salesforce org from the front end? All your business users. Is that right or wrong? Who are these business users? Right, like people from sales team, right, people from marketing team, right? The same way, people from, right, IT, HR, right? So anything, right? Customer support, right? So all of these people, right, use the Salesforce to perform their day-to-day business activities from the front end, right? The same way, right? So if you have to provide access to new users, okay, or if you have to create some new functionality based on the requirements that are that you are receiving from your business, okay, or maybe you have to provide some extra access, right, to few users, okay, to a particular team or something like that, okay. So you'll do all of that from here, right? The same way, okay, if you have to restrict some people, right, so anything, right, that is needed for your business, right, so within the Salesforce, right, all of that is being all of that you configure it and you'll customize it from the back end of the Salesforce. Who will do all of that? All the Salesforce professionals, right? So who all will come into the Salesforce professionals, right? Administrators, okay, developers, right, consultants, right? So we know business analysts and architects, right? So these are the people who work from the back end, right? To make sure that everything is available, based on the requirements of the business, right? For all the business users in the front end. Okay. So it's good. Okay. Now let's see how we can navigate through both front end and the back end in the Salesforce org that we have just created. Okay. So now we are in the Salesforce org, right? So the one that you are currently in is considered like the front end. Okay. So since we are the administrators, right, since we are the back end people, right, so we will have access to both front end and the back end. Why? Because, right, so we'll be building some functionality, right? So if we have to know how that functionality will work for the end users, we should have access to front end as well. Is that right or wrong? All right. The same way, okay, so if some user is facing some issue, okay, if some end user is facing some issue, okay, so if you have to resolve that particular issue, right, if you have to resolve that particular issue as a back-end person, right, as an administrator or maybe as a developer, what you should have, right, you should have access to that particular front end as well, right, so how that UI is looking for him and all of that, you should be able to see that. Then only you will be able to troubleshoot it, and then only you'll be able to resolve the issue for that particular end user, right? So for that reason, you should have access to both front end and the back end. Okay. So as an administrator, so we'll have both front end and back end access, right? So now currently we are in the front end, right? So if you have to access, right, anything within the front end, right, so you can access that from the different applications that are available in your Salesforce org, right? Different applications. Okay. So I'll tell you what these applications are, right? Application 1, application 2, application 3, okay, application 4, application 5, and all of that, right? In your Salesforce, you can create multiple applications, and based upon the requirements of the business, right? For sales team, you can have one separate application. Okay. So, and you can give that particular application for only the sales team people, right? Access to that particular application for only sales team people, right? The same way you can create one application for marketing people, right? And you can give only access to that application for that particular marketing team, right? The same way you can create one application for your support team members, right? And you can give only access to that particular application to the support team members, right? There will be some people where they would need access to all these three applications, right? So in that case, you will provide access to those people for all of these three applications, and they'll be able to access all these applications, right, from the front end. Okay. So currently we are in playground starter application, right? Salesforce has, I mean, like, Trailhead has already pre-configured this particular application in your org, right? I've told you, right? So whenever you create a Trailhead playground, what happens? Whenever you create a Trailhead playground, what happens? Salesforce will give you some pre-functionality, okay? Some configured functionality, right? So that is what this is, right? This playground is one of the this playground starter is one of the pre-configured functionality. But if you are creating a developer org, you'll not see this particular app. Okay. But if you are creating a Trailhead playground, you'll see this app. Why? Because Salesforce has installed this app, right? Configured this, pre-configured this particular app for this particular org, so that you can connect your Salesforce Trailhead, and you can connect your Salesforce playground, and you can perform you can complete all of your hands-on exercises and see how things are going between both the systems and everything, right? So that is the purpose of this particular app, right? That's how it will work, and you don't need to worry much about it, right? So we'll see all of that going forward, like how you can complete your hands-on exercises and all of that, right? So this is one of the apps, right? As I just told you, right? So you'll have multiple apps, right? Everything that you access from the front end of the Salesforce, you will access through apps, right? That is how Salesforce is designed. Okay. So based on the requirements of your end users, either you'll provide access to one app or two app or multiple apps and all of that, right? That's how we'll do it. Okay. So now we are in the front end, right? You are currently in what? We are currently in playground starter app. If you have to switch between other apps, right? Multiple apps, what you have to do is you have to go to app launcher, right? In our Salesforce org, there is something called app launcher. If you have to go to app launcher, you have to click on the 9 dots, right, towards the top left corner. Okay. So we call this as app launcher icon. Okay. So the moment you click on it, it will show all the apps that are there in your org, and you can just simply switch to whichever app that you want to access. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just simply come here and I'll click on this particular 9 dot app launcher icon and see what happens. The moment I click on it, right, it will show all the important apps, right? But if I want to see all the apps that are there in my org, I can just simply click on view all. Okay. If I click on view all, then what happens? I can see all the apps that are there in my org. I have service app, I have marketing app, I have community, right? I have sales.com, Salesforce charter, content, sales console, service console, digital experiences, and all other stuff, right? As I just told you, playground starter is something that Salesforce has by default installed it when we have created the Trailhead playground, right? So if you have to switch to any of the apps, you can just simply click on that particular app and it will take you to that particular app, right? I've clicked on the marketing app. Just because I've clicked on the marketing app, it took me to the marketing application. Okay. So once I go to the marketing application, right, I can see all the things that are there in this particular app, right? Like home is there, charter is there, right? You don't need to worry about all of these things. What is charter? What are campaigns, leads, contacts, and everything, right? We'll discuss all of these things in our upcoming classes. Okay. But for now, just simply, keep in mind that, right? So any group of similar items, right? Any group of similar items or similar processes, okay, similar objects, right? We call it as objects as well, right? Objects means this is the place where you'll store all of your data in Salesforce. We'll see all of that as well, right? So but this for now, just simply remember it like this. Okay. Any group of similar items which fulfills a particular business process, which fulfills a particular business requirement, right? Business requirement or a business process, okay, or business process. Okay. We group them all together, right? We group them all together and we create an application. Okay. Application is nothing but group of similar items, right? Those items could be objects. Those items could be, tabs. Those items could be Visualforce pages, right? Many more things are there, right? You don't need to worry about what are these objects, what are these Visualforce pages and all of that. So we'll discuss all of that in our upcoming classes. Okay. So, and if you're bringing together to solve a particular business problem, right? A business process or, a particular business requirement, to fulfill a particular business requirement, then we can consider that as an app. Okay. In our case, this is the marketing app. So marketing app is majorly used by marketing teams to run their marketing activities and all of that, and see how their marketing activities are performing and all of that, right? So this is the app that marketing teams mostly use, right? The same way we have some other apps like service, right? This service app is mostly used by customer support teams, okay, in any of the business, right? But if you look at the items, right, most of the items are looking similar, right? Most of the items are looking similar, but so this app is entirely different, right? So but these are same, right? Accounts, contacts, and home and charter are the same, but if you go to the cases, right, this is entirely different, right? This is something that is particularly we use it in the service app, right? That is the reason service people use this particular cases thing, right? That is the reason why we have cases available here. But in marketing, this is not there, right? In marketing, you have something called campaigns, right? That is a requirement of the marketing team. That is the reason why we have that in the marketing application. The same way, if you go to sales application, you will have some other thing, right? So if I go to sales application, so I'll have some different tabs here, right? If I see, so I have multiple tabs, right? With many more other things, right? Apart from home, charter, I don't have charter here, right? I have the charter, but it got moved to somewhere in between, right? I have the charter here, right? The same way I have opportunities, leads, and all of that. So all of these things we'll see, right? What these opportunities are, what these leads are, and all of that when we discuss, in detail about the sales applications and service applications and all of that. But sometimes in between I'll bring up these objects, right? But before we work on any of these objects, I'll explain what is the purpose of these leads, opportunities, and all other objects that we have in here. Okay, so see every application, right? If you look at any application, any web application, right, any software, right, so how it works, right? It will store some data, right? It will store some data and it will process that particular data, and it will give you some output or whatever it is based on our requirement, right? So that's what any software do, right? The same way Salesforce also does similar stuff, right? But in that case, right, we have to store data into our Salesforce, right? So how you can store data into Salesforce, right? If you look at any of the applications, right, web applications or any of the softwares, we store data into what? Tables. Okay, we store data into tables. Okay, so now so but before looking into how the data is stored into any of the applications, now generally look at how you store data in a book or some into an Excel or something like that. Okay, so if you are running a school, say for example, if you are running a school and if you want to maintain all of your students related details, right? So what you'll do, right? You'll keep a register, and within that register, right, for every class you'll have one register, right? Class 1, class 2, right, class 3, and all of that, right? So and then what you'll do, right? So in each and every class you'll store all the students information, right? How you'll store all of that information? You'll store all of that information in table only, right? So student number 1, student number 2, student number 3, student number 4, student number 5. For class 2 also, student number 1, 2, 3, 4, right? For class 3 also, you'll store somewhat similar like that, right? So number 1, 2, 3, 4, and all of that, right? So while storing this, what you'll do, right? So if you're storing students data, you'll store their roll number, okay, name of the student, okay, and which class he belongs to, right? So class is already there. We know, this is for first standard, right? So in that case, you may not be needing this particular column, right? So and what more you'll store, right? So you'll store their parents' phone number or something like that, right? Right, if they have any email address or something like that, you'll store all of that, right? So what you'll do, you'll store all of that in a table, right? In a table, what all things you'll have? You'll have columns, right? Roll number is a column, right? So name is a column, class is a column, parents phone number is a column, email is a column. But if you have to store some information, how you'll store that? Roll number 1, roll number 2, roll number 3, right? In roll number 1, I'll store information like Ishwar. If for 2, I'll store information something like Lasya, right? So for roll number 3, I can store some information like Stephen or something like that, right? For the class, I'll just simply give 1 for all the classes, right? For the phone numbers, I'll just simply give some number here, right? Some number here. The same way for email address also, I'll give some data right here, right? So if you look at each and every individual student, right? Where you're storing all of that data for each and every individual students, you're storing the data into rows. Is that right or wrong? Is that right or wrong, guys? Right? This is how we store it into any of the register. Okay. So the same kind of architecture or the same kind of model, even softwares also follows. Okay. So in any software, if you have to store the data, right? Say, for example, for the same school, if you want to store all of the students' data into any software, right? Something like school management system or something like that, right? Where you'll store all of that data, you'll store all of that data into different tables. Okay. So like, so for the same way, right? So you'll have roll number here, right? You'll have the name here, right? You'll have the class here, you'll have, email here, right? Blah, blah, and all of that. And you'll store all of the each and every individual student's data into different tables, right? And at the same time, if you want to access the data from the tables, right? So you'll display that into whichever format that you want to display in your UI, right? Into your front end, so that people can easily understand, like, so how the information is organized into your database, right? So that's how it is, right? So what all things you'll have in any of the table, in a table, you'll have columns, right? The same way you'll have rows. So what does columns generally store, right? So whatever data point that you want to capture, for a particular row, right, will store, track all of those data points using columns, right? In our case, if you want to capture students' data, right? So what do you do, right? So you'll create data points like roll number, name, class, parents' phone number and email and everything in the columns, and you'll store the students' data in the rows, like, the number one Ishwar of the first class with the phone number as 12345 and the email address as some blah, 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 blah. Okay. So you'll store all of that into rows and columns, right? The same architecture, even Salesforce also follows. Okay. So the same way, Salesforce also stores all of the data into tables, right? But we don't call them as tables in Salesforce. Okay. So for tables, we call them as objects. What do we call them? We call them as objects. Instead of tables in Salesforce, we call them as objects. Okay. So if you look at, the names like opportunities, leads, tasks, right? Accounts, all of these are objects, right? So along with objects, we do have some, non-object tabs as well, like home, files, dashboards, reports, and all of that. But generally, these are objects, right? These are opportunities, leads, and all of that, right? The same way, if you have some new requirement and, like, if you want to store some students' information, then what you'll do, you'll create one new object named student, right? That I mean, like, that means, right, you're creating a table, right? Within that object, you'll store all of your information. That means within that table, you'll store all of that information, right? If you look into these opportunities, right, now let's see how these opportunities are stored into this particular object, right? So now you'll get some more clear understanding. Okay. So now if I go to this opportunities, and if I just simply go to all opportunities, right, I can see all the opportunities that are there in here, right? So if you look at this, right, how this is looking for you, right? This is looking like a table, right? This is looking like a table. If you clearly observe, this is looking like a table. Okay. And with multiple columns. Okay. So, and what are those columns, right? Opportunity name is one column, account name is one column, amount is one column, close date is one column, stage is one column, and opportunity owner is one column, right? But if you look at the data, right? So all of the data is stored into different rows. Okay. So Burlington Textiles Waving Plan Generator is one stored in one row, right? Dickelson Mobile Generator is stored in one row. Edge emergency generator got stored into one row, right? Edge emergency generator, another edge emergency generator got stored into another row. Edge installation got stored into another row, right? This way you'll store all of your data into different rows, right? So if I have to see what all data that is there associated with a particular row, what can you do is, right? See, I cannot keep all the columns in a single, view, right? So in that case, what I can do is I can just simply click on any of the, row. Then what will happen? It will take me to the all details of that particular what student, right? If this is a student, then it will show all the details of that particular student. In our case, this is an opportunity, right? So then it will show all the details of that opportunity, right? Account name, right? So, and close date, amount, opportunity, owner. And if you come down, right, you can see all other details of like, amount, private, and all other stuff, right? Web, order number, and all of these things. Okay. So this is how data is stored into what? Salesforce. Okay. So in a table, what do we call it, right? And if you in a table, right, what is the naming convention that we generally follow in a table? We call this as a table, right? Within a table, what all you have, right? The data points you have is columns, right? And the data that you're storing in is called as what, right? If these are the columns like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Some X, Y, Z, or something like that, right? These are the rows, right? How the data is being stored into the tables. Data is being stored into the tables via rows, right? So the same kind of model Salesforce also follows, but instead of table, we call it as an object. Okay. So remember this naming convention. Instead of table, what do we call it? What do we call it? Object, right? The same way, instead of columns, okay? Instead of columns, what do we call it as? We call it as fields. Okay. What do we call it? We call it as fields. Okay. So instead of rows, right, the data that what is getting stored into the table, instead of calling them as rows, we call them as records. What do we call them? We call them as records, right? So you'll have an object as a table, and within that object, you'll have fields as columns, and you'll store data into those fields, right, through records. Okay. So rows, we call them as records. Okay. So this particular naming convention you should remember. So going forward, whenever we create any table or something like that, so I'll call that as an object, right? Going forward, if I'm creating any of the column or something like that, so I'll call it as like a field, right? Going forward, if I'm creating any data, I'll call it as a record. Okay. Right. So now let's see, right? So if I come back to this opportunity is an object, right? So, and if I go to any of the records, right, this is a record, right? If I go to any of the record, like whatever things that I'm seeing here, like account name, close date, and all of that, and if I go to detail section, right, there are many more other fields are also available. So all of these things, we call them as fields. Is it clear so far, guys? Is it clear so far? Is it clear so far? Wonderful, wonderful, right? So this is how the end business users switch between multiple apps, right? Switch between multiple apps and, go to any of the objects that they need to work on and, perform their day-to-day activities. Okay. So now we have seen how the front end looks like and how to navigate within the front end and all of that. But we are Salesforce professionals, right? So we are the developers and we are the administrators and we are the consultant and the technical architects, right? So how can we configure all of these things? How can we change something? And how can we, build a new functionality or whatever it could be, right? How can we do all of that? Right? We can do all of that from the backend, right? How can we access that backend? Right? In order to access the backend, what you have to do is you have to click on this gear icon towards the top right corner. You can see the gear icon, right? If I click on that, right, it will take me to the setup, right? I'll see something called setup, right? If you click on the setup, it will take us to the backend, right? So going forward, I'll not call it as a backend, right? I'll just simply call it as setup. Okay. So in Salesforce, the terminology that we use is setup, right? Setup is the backend, right? From this particular setup, we create new users, right? If you have to provide access to some new person, right? A new employee has joined our business and we need to provide access to that new employee to our Salesforce org. So how can you do that? I can go to the users in the backend, and from here, right, I can see who all are there in my Salesforce org, right? And at the same time, if I need to create a new user or something like that, I can create a new user from here, right? This is where it is, right? And at the same time, right, and if I need to see my company's information, right, I can see my company information like from the something called company information from the setup, right? So I can go to the company information, I can see all the information related to my company, right? What is my organization name, and what is my company's address, what is my company's financial year, when my company's financial year start from, and all of that, like, so how many user licenses were there, how many licenses were utilized so far, how many licenses we have purchased, and how many licenses were we utilized so far, and all other stuff, right? blah, 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 and all other things we can see from this particular thing, right? The same way you can set business hours from here, right? So what are, see, every business will have some business hours, right? So the day starts from a particular time and day ends at a particular time. You can specify like that, right? Whether your business runs 24 hours a day, or whether it only runs from a particular time to particular time, and all of that. You can set up all of those things, right? So anything, right? You can build some new functionalities, as I just told you, right? So all of these things, all the data that we store in our Salesforce is, right, in the objects, right? The same way, if you have to build a new functionality or a new application, right, within that new application, you may need different new objects, right? Different new tables that needs to be created, right? So how can you create that, right? You can go to the object manager, and from here, right, you can create the custom objects, whatever objects that are needed for you. And if you want to see all the existing objects, right, the existing tables that are there in your org, you can see all of that here, right? So if I open account object, right, there is an object called account, right, which stores customers information, right? So if I go to the object, so I can see all the, I can configure everything, which is related to that particular object from this particular, setup related object manager of that particular object. If I want to see all the fields in that object, I can see all the fields from here, right? If I need to, modify any field, I can modify any field. If I want to create a new field or new column, I can do that, right? The same way, there are multiple things that I can perform from the setup, right? This is what the backend is all about, right? If I have to switch back to front end, how can you do that? Again, I can just simply click on the app launcher icon towards the top left corner, and I can click on whichever app that I want to switch to, right? If I want to go back to the service, I can go back to the service, and I can just simply, access whatever things that are needed for me to access from the front end. Okay. So this is what all about the navigation within the Salesforce org. Okay, good. Okay, now let's look at the Salesforce architecture. Okay, so now let me share my screen once again. Okay, let me go to the paint. Okay, so there are three major things that you need to know about the Salesforce platform. Okay, so what is Salesforce platform? Okay, earlier this used to be called as force.com platform. Okay, but now this is called as Salesforce platform. Okay, what is this Salesforce platform? Okay, now let me tell you. Okay, so whatever we have seen so far, right, in the Salesforce org, all of this is running on top of Salesforce platform itself. Okay, so any application, right, that you are seeing here in your front end, right, or so anything that is there in your Salesforce, it was built on top of Salesforce platform itself. Okay, so we have discussed, right, multiple products yesterday, if you do remember, right? What kind of products we have discussed, right? So there are multiple products, right? What kind of products we have seen? So we have seen Sales Cloud, right? Service Cloud, okay, and industries. Yeah, so and many more other things, right? So all of these products were built on top of this Salesforce platform itself. Okay, so we use the same Salesforce platform to build any of the custom applications. What is this custom application? Custom application means any of the product that we want, right, to manage our business, right? So we can customize those applications, or we can create those applications on top of the Salesforce platform itself. Okay, Salesforce platform itself. And we are currently on top of the Salesforce platform. All of these service apps and all the apps that we have seen, right? The Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, right? The sales app, service app, and all of those things are built on top of the Salesforce platform itself. And if you want to build any new apps, you can build the new apps as well, right? So that is what the Salesforce platform is all about. Okay, but if you want to integrate Salesforce with external applications, you can still, external applications or external systems, you can still do that, right? But those applications will be on external systems, but they can seamlessly communicate with your Salesforce platform, right? That is what we have seen yesterday, right? Salesforce has, some other products in their product suite, right, which are not on top of Salesforce platform, but they are Salesforce products. What are those products? Marketing Cloud, right? And we have seen some other products as well, like Tableau, right, and MuleSoft, right? So all of these products are external products, right? They were not built on top of Salesforce platform, but they are seamlessly integrated with Salesforce platform. And the same way, right, Salesforce platform can be integrated with any other applications. Okay, so now this is what the platform is all about. Okay, so now if you have to I'm like, so now whatever applications that we are going to build in our upcoming classes, right, we'll build all of those applications on the Salesforce platform itself, right? So Salesforce platform is different, Salesforce org is different, right? We are in the org, but everything that is there in the org is built on top of Salesforce platform. Okay, right. So now we know what is Salesforce platform, right? So there are three major things that you need to know, right? So if you are working on Salesforce platform, so what are those three things, right? Those three things are: one, multi-tenancy. Okay, and the second one is metadata driven application development. Okay, so I'll explain each and everything in detail. Okay, and the third one is APIs, right? So these are the three things that you should be knowing about Salesforce platform, right? These three unique things that you should be knowing about Salesforce platform. Now let's see what all these three important things. Okay, so say for example, right, you are living in an service apartment. Okay, so what you generally have, right, in a big apartment, right, what you'll generally have, you'll have multiple flats. Is that right or wrong? Right? Flat 1, 2, 3, 4, and all of that. Right? 6, 7, 8, 9, blah, 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 and all of that. Right? So if you look at this particular apartment building, okay, if you look at this particular apartment building, right, so you'll have some common resources or the facilities that are available for each and every apartment, right? So what those common facilities could be, right? Lift service, right? Water supply, electricity, okay, and security. Is that right or wrong? Right? So these things you'll have in common for all of these apartments. Okay, but at the same time, right, even though all of these apartments have the same kind of facilities, right, even if you look at each and every apartment, so if you go to that apartment flat, right, if you go to each and every flat that is there in each and every, I mean, like in this particular apartment, right, each and every flat is unique, right? The first flat may have a great interior, right? The second flat may have wonderful kitchen, right? The third flat may have a great, living room, right? Some fourth flat may have all of these things, right? Great interior plus great kitchen plus great, living room, right? So all of these things, this fourth flat may have, right? So if you clearly observe, right, so each and every apartment is sharing a similar resources, but if you go to each and every apartment individually, so those apartments will have their own unique set of features, like, so someone may have the great interiors, right? Someone may have great kitchen, someone may have great living room, someone may have wonderful bedroom and all of that, right? That means what is it, right? So even though each and every, right, so flat will look same, right, when no one is occupied, right? So with the skeleton on all of that, but once people started occupying it, right, people will customize those flats according to their needs. Same way, okay, so Salesforce also follow a similar kind of architecture, right? That is what we call it as multi-tenant architecture. Okay, so here what is there, right? Here there are multiple tenants. Okay, you can call each and every person who is staying in a flat can be you can call them as tenants, right? So that's how Salesforce also works, right? So what will happen is, right, in Salesforce, what we'll have is, right, so we'll have the same kind of resources, right? Resources means like lift service and water service, electricity, and security. So these are same for each and every flat, right? But at the same time, each and every flat is individual when you go to their particular flat, right? The same way, Salesforce also have their Salesforce orgs in a single instance, right? Salesforce also keep all of their Salesforce orgs in a single instance, right? But at the same time, right, whatever orgs that are there in that instance, right, so some business one is using the first Salesforce org, some retail business is using second Salesforce org, some manufacturing business is using some this particular Salesforce org, right? Some other what is it, right? Some other banking company is using this particular Salesforce org, right? So you like this in a single instance, right? You can have multiple Salesforce orgs irrespective of the size of the business, right? Whether you are a startup or whether you are a multi-billion-dollar company, right? You will receive the same kind of resources, right? Resources in the means, right? Same kind of computing power, right? So these are servers, right? So Salesforce org, your Salesforce org or your software is stored in servers, right? So that means all of these computers receive the same kind of computing power, same kind of bandwidth, right? Irrespective of the size of your business and all of that, irrespective of the size of your Salesforce org, right? Everything will receive the same kind of resources, but at the same time, each and every company, right, can customize their Salesforce orgs to fit their needs, and to fit their business requirements. Okay. So, and this particular thing, we call it as a multi-tenancy. Okay. So just because you're staying in a 3 BHK apartment, right, 3 BHK flat within this particular apartment, that doesn't mean that, you can occupy an extra corridor or something like that, right? So that doesn't mean that, you will have, you can use, you can consume whatever kind of water that you want to consume, right? That doesn't mean that, you'll have an extra security guard or something like that, right? So whether it's a 1 BHK, whether it's a 2 BHK, whether it's a 3 BHK, everyone will receive the same kind of resources, but they can customize that particular flat according to their own needs, right? The same way, Salesforce also, places all of its Salesforce orgs, right? Customer Salesforce orgs into multiple instances, right? So I mean, like different instances, but a single instance will contain multiple orgs, right? So all of those orgs will receive the same kind of resources, right? Like computing power, bandwidth, and everything. But each and every company can customize their Salesforce orgs to fit their business needs. See, since you are a multi-billion-dollar business, that doesn't mean that, you can use more computing power or you can use more bandwidth and all of that. Salesforce has kept limitations, right, on each and everything that you can use in terms of resources, but you can customize it each and every org to suit your needs, right? Based on the number of licenses and based on the number of, other things, right? You can customize your Salesforce org, but still you'll receive the same kind of, resources that what all other businesses are receiving. Okay. Now let's look at the metadata driven application development. Like, what this metadata driven application development is. Okay. Multi-tenancy, you guys know what is it. Now let's look at metadata driven architecture. Okay. Sorry, metadata driven application development. What is this metadata driven application development? Metadata driven application development. Okay. Right. Okay. So now you have your Salesforce org. Okay. So your business is using that particular org. Okay. If you have to build some new functionality, so if you are building that functionality in the same org, say for example, in the same org, right? And if you are making it available for your end users, what if something goes wrong? What if you have implemented something wrong, right? So that could cause problems for the end business users, right? So if that creates the problems, then what will happen? If that software is, if whatever functionality that you have created, right, say for example, that functionality could have crashed some other existing functionality. Okay. So then what will happen, right? All of your end business users will not be able to perform their day-to-day operations within the Salesforce org, right? So then you'll have lot of losses, right? So for that reason, what Salesforce has done is, right, you should not build your functionality within the same org where your business users are using the Salesforce for their day-to-day business activities, right? So now whatever org that your business is using for their day-to-day activities, we call that as production org. What is it? We call that as production org. Along with this production org, what Salesforce has done is, right, so whenever you purchase any of the licenses from Salesforce, right, what Salesforce will do is, along with this production org, they'll give you some sandbox orgs as well for free. Okay. So what you will generally do is, right, the sandboxes are nothing but the replication, right? The replicas of your production org. Whatever your production org is there, the same kind of replica you'll have in the sandbox orgs, right? So what you'll do is, right, whatever new functionality that you want to build, you'll build all of that functionality in any of the sandboxes that you have, right, as a developer. And then what you'll do is you'll test everything within these sandboxes, right? Once you feel everything is properly working, then you will deploy that to the production so that your end business users will be able to use that particular functionality. Okay. So what you'll do is you'll divide your sandboxes into multiple sandbox. And I mean, like, so while developing anything, what we generally do is, right, in Salesforce ecosystem, right, we build our functionality, we develop our functionality in one sandbox. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll move all of that functionality to the sandbox too. Okay. And we'll test everything over there. Okay. Once we feel like, everything is working fine, right, in this second sandbox, then what we'll do is we'll move the same functionality to the another sandbox. We call it as user acceptance test, right? This way you can have any number of sandboxes and you can follow any number of multiple steps. But this is one of the simple steps that people follows, right? For developing, they'll have different orgs. For testing, they'll have different orgs. And for UAT means user acceptance test. User acceptance test means this testing in sandbox 2 is carried out by the developers, whoever has developed it, right? So the colleagues of that particular developer could be testing it, or maybe the testers within that particular project would be testing it, right? But user acceptance test is something different, where the business users will come into the sandbox and they'll check whether the functionality that you guys have built is working as required, or is behaving like what they were looking for and all of that. And if they feel like everything is fine, then that will be deployed into the production. Okay. So this is one of the development models that we follow in Salesforce. Okay. Development or deployment models that we follow in Salesforce, right? So now if you have to build the functionality and if you have to move that particular functionality from one org to other, like how can you do that, right? You can do that with the help of metadata, right? So what we'll do is, right, we will, whatever functionality that we are building, right? So all of that functionality, we'll package it into some kind of a package, right? Software package. And then we will deploy that package to other sandboxes. And then it will just simply, once everything is fine, and we'll deploy the final package into our production org, and then we'll make it live so that end business users can use that. But what is this metadata, right? I've just told you, right, you'll package all the metadata, the functionality that you have built, and you will push that to production. But what is this metadata? Let me tell you, right? So if you look at the table that what we have seen earlier, right? So what do we have? We have serial number or the roll number, and name, we have email address, we have phone number, we have, and all other stuff, right? And the same way we have data that is stored into each and every individual row, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and all of that. Okay. So if you look at this table, whatever we are storing into rows, that is considered as data. Okay. But if you look at this particular thing, serial number, name, email, phone number, and all of that. So these, what are these things, right? What are these things? These things are the data points that we want to collect, but that is not the data, right? That is not the data. Okay. But that is the data points. Arya, what happened? But what is that? That is, they are the data points, right? So they are the data points, right? So whatever we create in our Salesforce org, right? So anywhere, right? So if you have some data about data, that thing we call it as a metadata. What is metadata? Metadata is data about data. Okay. So here you are storing data, right? So what data you are storing, right? So that you are capturing through your metadata, right? Here you are capturing serial number, right? Here you are capturing name, here you are capturing email, right? So this name, email, serial number, and phone number are the data points, right? That is not the data, right? So if you are storing the data for a particular student, right? So that is the data. That student's name is Ishwar is the data. His email address is like, wakada.ishwarnaidu or something like that @gmail.com. That is his data, right? So his phone number like 86866 something, that is his data. But the phone number itself is the data point named, the phone number itself is not the data, right? This is the metadata, right? So the data about the data, we call it as a metadata. Okay. The data about the data, we call it as a metadata, right? So that means whatever functionality that we build in our Salesforce, for each and every functionality, for each and every field, for each and every object that you create, right? For each and every field, right? Here it is, here, what are all of this? Serial number, name, email, phone number, and all of those are fields, right? The same way, what is this, right? This is a table. What is the name of the table? Right? Student is the name of the table, right? This is the object, if you want to ask me, right? So if you ask me, that is the object, right? That object, the fields, any new functionality that you build in your Salesforce, right? For each and every functionality, for each and every configuration, right, that you build, right? So there will be a metadata that gets created in the backend. Okay. There will be a metadata that gets created in the backend. Say, for example, you have to deploy the same object with all the fields that you have created into your production org. What you will do, you'll create that object and you will create all of those fields in your sandbox first. And then, right, the moment you create it, right, so there will be some metadata created in the backend for each and every field, object, and everything. Then if you have to deploy that into your sandbox too, what you'll do is you'll just simply pick that particular metadata and you'll package all of that and you'll just deploy that metadata, packaged metadata into your sandbox too, right? And then what will happen? You will take that packaged metadata from your sandbox 2 and you'll deploy it into sandbox 1, right? Once everything is tested here, right, by adding some data and testing how that particular data is being stored and all of that. And if you feel like everything is working fine, then again, you'll take that particular metadata package and you'll deploy it into the production. Okay. And then that functionality will be available for your and business users, right? That is what we call it as metadata driven application development. Okay. So in Salesforce platform, we follow metadata driven application development, right? And now the next, the last part of the Salesforce platform is what? APIs. Okay. What are these APIs? Okay. Now let's look into this. Okay. So at any given point in time, I've told you, right? So any business will use multiple softwares, right? It is not just Salesforce. Okay. So in this case, right? So this could be Salesforce, right? This could be some Outlook, or this could be some other application, right? Application 1 or application 2 or something like that. These are not Salesforce applications, guys, right? So I'm talking about other softwares, right? Software 3 or software 5 or software 6 or something like that, right? So most of the times, right, since businesses are using multiple applications, right, most of the times these applications need to talk to one another, right? So these applications need to talk to each other, right? So when you create a student, right, say for example, when you create a student record, right, in your Salesforce, say for example, you want that data to be passed to your another system, right? Another Salesforce software named student management system or something like that. You have something like this. Say, for example, you have another system called student management system. So in this student management system, you are doing some kind of activities, right? But in Salesforce, you are selling all of your courses and everything to your students, right? But all of the students related attendance and blah, blah, and all other stuff, you are maintaining it in another custom software application, right? So that is named as student management system or something like that. This, say, for example, this application was built on .NET or something like that. Okay. So the moment a student is created in your Salesforce org, you want that student to be passed or you want that student information needs to be pushed to the student management system as well, right? How can you do that, right? In order to do that, you can do it with the help of APIs. Okay, what you can do is you can do that with the help of APIs. So every configuration or everything that you create, every functionality that you create in your Salesforce generates APIs for all of them by default. Okay, what Salesforce will do is Salesforce generates API for all of them by default, and you can use those API names, and by using those APIs, you can do anything, right? If you want to integrate your Salesforce to another system, right? If you want to pass the data to another system, which data that needs to be passed, and how that data needs to be passed and all of that, you can do that with the help of APIs. Okay, API, full form of the API is application programming interface. Okay, so just simply understand all of this functional, all of these things theoretically. Once we start working on things in the real-time environment, then you will be able to understand all of these things in more detailed and more depth. But for now, just simply try to understand that in the theoretical perspective. Just try to understand what is this all about. Okay, so Salesforce creates APIs for each and everything. Using those APIs, you can communicate with any of the apps that are available externally, right? So you can communicate your with another Salesforce org if you want to communicate, right? Or if you want to communicate with another application, right, you can communicate with other application with the help of APIs. Okay, so sometimes the APIs that are available, standard APIs that are available from Salesforce, those APIs may not be sufficient, right, for you in order to integrate your Salesforce to some other applications. In those cases, you'll build your own custom APIs, right, based on the requirements that you have, right? And again, you'll use those APIs, and by using those APIs, you can connect to any of the external applications. Okay, so these are the three major things, right? Since we have the APIs, so you can connect your Salesforce to any of the applications, right? So since Salesforce follows multi-tenant architecture, right? Since Salesforce follows multi-tenant architecture, right? So any org, right, any business that is using Salesforce will have the same set of resources, like a multi-billion-dollar business, right? It is not that you'll have low resources or something like that. Every business will have the same kind of resources, but at the same time, you can have your own set of requirements built within your Salesforce org, right? The same way, what is it, right? So it follows metadata driven application development model, right? Metadata driven application development model. Why? Because you can, whatever functionality that you have created, right, you can capture all of that functionality through the metadata, and you can package it, and you can deploy them to multiple Salesforce org, depends upon your requirement. Okay, and the last one is APIs, right? Salesforce is not just the only app that any businesses use, right? Businesses will use multiple apps. So in order to make the seamless communication between any of the apps, right, any of the external softwares with your Salesforce softwares, we use APIs to do that. Okay, so the same way we have already discussed, right? So we have products on Salesforce platform, right? We have products like what? Sales Cloud, right? Service Cloud and all other stuff, right? Industries and all other stuff. But the same way, you have some other external products from Salesforce like Tableau, right? MuleSoft, right? And Slack and all of that, right? Marketing Cloud and Slack and all of that, right? How these applications seamlessly work with the apps that are there on our Salesforce platform. The reason why, because APIs, right? These APIs, right? So since we have APIs, we can create any APIs, and using these APIs, we can connect any of the applications, right? So we use this particular APIs, and that is how this is possible. This app exchange is like Play Store, right? Like how we have Play Store on our Android, right? The same way, Salesforce has this app exchange, right? And using this app exchange, right, you can deploy, right? You have your Salesforce org here. Okay, you have your Salesforce org here, and you have app exchange here. Okay, in app exchange, you will find multiple apps, right? App 3, app 4, and all of that, right? app 5, app 6, whatever it could be, right? There are almost like 9,000 apps I've told you, right? So based on your requirement, right? So see, it is not easy for us to develop each and everything all the time, right? Sometimes if that functionality is already available, or if that functionality is already built by someone, and if they have already kept it as an app on App Exchange, right? Why do you need to build all of that functionality once again, right? If the cost of building that application, and maintaining that application is more than the cost of what this particular app is offering for you, right? And if you buy this, if you can buy this app, right? So instead of building that everything on your own, what you can do is you can just simply take this particular app and install this app into your Salesforce org, and boom, your Salesforce users and users can use this particular app, right, for their day-to-day business use cases, right, or their day-to-day business operations, right? That is the beauty of App Exchange. And how can I go to App Exchange, and from where I can find App Exchange? Now let's see that. Okay, so in order to go to App Exchange, what you have to do is, right, go and search for appexchange.salesforce.com, or you can just simply search for App Exchange in the Google. It will take you to the App Exchange, right? If you go to App Exchange, if you just simply come here, right, come to the home, you'll find all the apps that are available in the App Exchange. Okay, so if I just simply see here, right, AC event slide for Experience Cloud, something like this. Email to anything is another app, right? CRM Apps Lab is some app. Aprio is some another app, right? They've built something related to retail and franchise promotion management or something like that, right? There is something called demand based. There is something called smart news, right? So hell lot of apps are there, right? Depends upon your business requirement. You can just simply, install that app into your Salesforce org. There will be free apps as well, right? There will be paid apps and there will be free apps as well. So this is something, this app is a free app, it seems. Okay, so if you want to know how that app works and all of that, you can just simply watch the demo videos and all of that, right? And you can see how it looks in the mobile, and how it generally looks in the Salesforce org and all of that. And if you go to the reviews, you can see all the reviews, okay, for that particular app and all of that, right? So, and if you want to install it, you can just simply get it now, click on get it now, and it will ask you to log in into your Salesforce org. And once you log in into your Salesforce org, and it will ask you to install it, the moment you click on install, this app will get installed into your Salesforce org, right? The same way, if you look at this particular app earlier, right, this Trailhead playground starter, right? This app is also somewhat similar to that, right? But this app, we didn't install it from App Exchange. Salesforce, from Trailhead itself, by, so it pre-configured this app for us, right? The same way, whatever apps that you build in your Salesforce org, you can, list those apps in the App Exchange, right? You can list those apps in the App Exchange, and whatever functionality that you have built, right, in your Salesforce, or you can package that and you can share it with any of other people as well. Say for example, you have built a functionality, you have built one app in your Salesforce org, and you want to share that app with your team members. What you can do is you can package that, and you can just simply give that package to your team members, and they can install that package into their org, and then that app will be available for them, right? The same kind of packages, right? So if you go and list it in the App Exchange, right, they'll be available for all the Salesforce customers, and they can install it, right, into their Salesforce org. Either you can list it for free, or you can make it available for paid as well. But so there are few guidelines that you have to follow, right? If you, in order to place any app, right, you have to follow the security guidelines of Salesforce. They'll first review your app, and if they feel like your app is if your app has followed all the best practices and there are no security vulnerabilities and all of that, then only they'll make your app live. And then once the app is live, then anyone from the Salesforce ecosystem can just simply come to App Exchange, and they can install it into their Salesforce orgs. Okay, so this is what App Exchange is all about.